From here to the end of the island, washing away. When you come home, I'll lift you up, and there's only the two of us, black. Now you're sleeping in the back of a speeding kiss goodbye to all that. In the ground we bury the seeds of a pantry, all the things we carry.
Please welcome to the stage Kirsten Madison, Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement at the U.S. Department of State, and our esteemed panel.
Ready? So, good afternoon, everyone. We are here really because of a staggering number, which is the fact that more than 70,000 Americans died in 2017 from overdoses. It's an astonishing number, and what it really says to us is that we have some important work to do to try and address this profound crisis. And the reason we're sitting here with this esteemed group of panelists is because part of that conversation has to be about the partnership between government and private industry. So I'm joined by the Counselor to the President, Ms. Kellyanne Conway. I'm joined also by a colleague from LIDOS, Ms. Heisey, Udom Dillon, who is the Acting Administrator of DEA, and Mr. Walker, who comes to us from Google. We are, because of the delay in our start, going to start with Mr. Walker. So that we have a chance to hear from you about some of the amazing, creative things that Google is doing to work on this issue and the real leadership that your company is showing. Mr. Walker.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and appreciate the leadership that Kellyanne and the White House have shown in pulling together a group of companies in the last couple of years to really focus on this question and look at what we can do, not just as government, not just as companies, but in partnership across the board. Over the last few years, we have, like everyone else, noted the explosion in the opioid epidemic. As an information company, we have asked what we can do. All of our companies can contribute in different ways to these issues. For us, it was looking at the fact that 90% of addiction starts in the teenage years. So we partnered with we worked with the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids to not only steer queries coming in online about drugs to their hotline, but helping to staff and support that hotline. We've looked at the challenge of addiction and recovery programs, and recently launched a new effort to launch a website called Recover Together, which tells the stories of a variety of people in recovery to make sure that people understand that there are resources near them that are available, that are high quality, that they can get to easily. We've improved the quality of the referral centers that we direct people to on Google. And perhaps most fundamentally, in our largest cooperative effort with the government, we've worked with Administrator Dillon and the DEA on National Take Back Day. This is an effort that was launched in recent years and has now become sort of a constant. It's not just an annual event, it's something that's available all the time. Working together with leading drugstore chains like CVS, Rite Aid and Walmart, and Walgreens, excuse me, to have more than 20,000 different locations throughout the country where individuals can turn in prescription medication, which is very frequently the pathway to other kinds of opioid abuse and addiction, heroin and other drugs. So these kinds of partnerships have been extraordinarily effective. We have seen in the last year alone a 30% increase in the number of queries we're seeing in the Google search engine for people looking for ways to return prescription medication to these various channels. So it's one illustration of how government and private sector working together, working with other companies, can start to turn the tide of this epidemic. So we appreciate the opportunity to be included here today. I unfortunately have to leave in just a few minutes for another engagement, but we've been delighted and honored to be part of this very important effort.
Thank you so much. You truly, the leadership your company is showing is astounding. By all means, leave when you need to, but we've been very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Councillor Conway, may I turn to you next? I think it would be really useful if you could provide some context for everyone that's here regarding the broader initiatives that this administration has taken on to work on this issue. And since we've just come from a roundtable with private industry, if you could talk to us a bit about the importance of a partnership with private industry as we work on this.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary, and thank you all for being here and for your interest in this topic. The President and the First Lady have made a centerpiece of the administration tackling the opioid crisis and the larger drug supply, drug demand, crisis next door, as we call it, that's roiling this country. We all know the harrowing statistics, but I'd also like to review a little bit of the progress report today and really punctuate for you how important it is that we are working with people in the private sector as well, and maybe how you can help in combating what nonpartisan experts say is the single worst drug crisis in our nation's history. So 72,000 deaths, 130 a day from opioids, about 32,000 a year from fentanyl now. And I think what the President is doing is tackling this in three ways. One is prevention and education, one is treatment and recovery, and the third is law enforcement and surveillance. We cannot arrest or punish our way out of the drug crisis. And the reason that we refer to it as the crisis next door at the White House and have part of our website dedicated to that, you can pull it up, where people can download, upload their own, share their own stories. We call it the crisis next door for two big reasons. One is it's completely indiscriminate. It affects every race, all ages, both genders, all socioeconomic and demographic and geographic groups. It is completely indiscriminate. And so it is the crisis next door. It has worked its way into every nook and cranny in this country. Secondly, the crisis next door suggests to people that the silence and stigma that is a major impediment for many people accessing treatment, let alone just even confiding in somebody in their circle of life that maybe they are misusing prescription opioids or illicit opioids. That silence and stigma needs to be busted through so that people come forward and feel more comfortable and more accepted to seek treatment and seek help. So the prevention education piece is everything from Take Back Day, where so far, next month will be the last Saturday in October will be our 6th consecutive Take Back month of the Trump administration, and we keep breaking records, unfortunately. I'd never like to break the record again because we hope there's just less of a supply. But literally, Kirsten, millions and millions and millions of pounds of pills have been returned during these Take Back Days and now throughout the year, where our goal has been to make every day Take Back Day. And indeed, we're doing that with great partners like Leidos and certainly like Google, where you don't have to wait until the last Saturdays in April and October to bring back your drugs. You can do it all year round at some pharmacies. You can mail it to the National Safety Council free of charge all year long. So we're working with people like Walmart has Dispose RX. You put the pills in there, they dissolve properly, and it's environmentally safe, and it's obviously safe for you and your family to not have access to them. But in addition, prevention education means that we partnered with the Ad Council and the Truth Initiative in doing a very big public relations campaign. The long form of one of our ads won an Emmy, actually, and they're to credit for that. They really did a fantastic job. That's been seen by 58% of its target market youth, about 1.2 billion impressions of those ads, and we're continuing to develop more. Prevention also means just giving basic information. And this is where the private sector is and can be so helpful, because we are trying to inject into the everyday lexicon in this country words like Narcan, naloxone, fentanyl. Fentanyl killed 32,000 Americans last year, and many people don't know what it is, or that a tiny grain is lethal. Narcan, we have, I hope they're still here, Emergent Biosolutions is here as one of our private sector partners. They have donated to the YMCAs, YWCAs, public libraries, high schools, colleges, and universities free Narcan, free nasal Narcan. And they're trying to make us all first responders, if you will, that it's easy to administer it, and you literally can reverse an overdose and save a life. So the Surgeon General about 1.5 years ago came out with an advisory, first in 13 years, and that advisory was about Narcan and naloxone, and encouraging all of us, just everyday Americans, to have access to it and not be afraid to use it, because it's easy to use and you can actually save a life. So prevention education, then really informing people that the tiny little bottle of prescription opioids is very tricky, because it bears the label of the family doctor, the local pharmacy, mom and dad's name, grandmom's name, maybe your name as a teenager. And yet, if you misuse that prescription, like any other prescription, it could be very dangerous. And what we've really been happy with is when the president called in March of 2018 for a 1/3 reduction over the next 3 years, 30% reduction in the following 3 years in first-time prescriptions. We've exceeded that in the first 18 months. We're up to about 36% now. And people who need pain relief will get it. We're talking about the 15-year-old's root canal, the college athlete going with 30 pills, for a sprained ankle. We're talking about the routine surgery. And many companies, I know Angela will talk about it soon, but many companies and many prescribers now are saying, hey, let's start out with 5 pills or 10 pills. And if you need more, you can get them, but most people don't. And so you don't have the rest laying around. Treatment and recovery, I'm glad to report that in an overwhelmingly bipartisan fashion, H.R. 6 was signed into law last year. It is the single most comprehensive piece of legislation in our nation's history on any one drug crisis. And H.R. 6 passed with every single Democratic vote in the House and the Senate, including those currently running for president who were in the House and the Senate at the time. And it provides so much money. It provides billions of dollars in funding. It provides deregulatory efforts in some areas so that we can fill those beds and still get Medicaid reimbursement. It's something called the CRIB Act, something that our First Lady Melania Trump is focused on, the neonatal abstinence syndrome babies. They're born struggling to take their first breaths of life because 1 in 100, roughly 150 plus newborns every day come into this country already chemically dependent. So the CRIB Act tries to keep the mother and the newborn together, great for the mother, really great for the newborn, and get some longitudinal data on what happens to these babies. The CARA Recovery Act, the state opioid response grants that were distributed from the White House 2 weeks ago, $1.8 billion. What I like about those, Kirsten and I wanted to bring attention, every single state, all 50 states, the District of Columbia, all the territories, received money in the state opioid response grant. So if the crisis is indiscriminate, the response must also be indiscriminate. Just moving along to law enforcement interdiction. At the 26 ports of entry just last year, our law enforcement officials, they seized enough fentanyl, just fentanyl, to have killed every man, woman, and child in this country 4 times over. And in addition to that, between the ports of entry, just that we know about 90 million additional Americans' lives worth of fentanyl. So the interdictions are up. And I think part of the H.R. 6 that really mattered was something called the STOP Act, where we now have our own postal service doing what our third-party carriers have had to do for a while, which is have sender-recipient contents on every package. This is really disrupting the ability of packages of foreign origin coming into our communities as freely as they were before. So it's disrupting that. So where do we go from here? When we're partnering with the private sector, Kent Walker from Google, they've just been an amazing partner in this, talking about the Recover Together website and talking about the locators and talking about partnering up with some of the larger pharmacies. This is all saving lives, literally, and mitigating damage. What I think the private sector can do now, if they're willing, is come aboard, and we're trying to help you as well. We recently put out fentanyl advisories where you can get more information on the money, the movement, the manufacturing, and the marketing of illicit opioids. So many of your supply chains, your distribution centers, your factory conveyor belts themselves are being intercepted and disrupted with illicit drugs, unbeknownst, unwittingly, and it can ruin a brand like that if it's revealed unwitting. So we are trying to give you information, but I think from the private sector, Kirsten, to move the conversation along, it's data sharing, it's technology, it's best practices, and it's also, I think, these private-public partnerships that have worked so well in so many other areas where the government, the whole of government approach, where we're trying to treat the whole person, couples up, meets up with what the private sector can do to help. And I'm so happy that even today we had the U.S. Global Partnership, we have Bear with us, LexisNexis, the aforementioned folks, really wonderful partners who just want to find out how to assist the whole of government approach. One final thing, in the opioids cabinet that I run out of the White House, we have the departments and agencies you might expect, DOJ and HHS and the VA, but we also have the State Department. We're studying the cartels. They're really smart and really savvy and a couple steps ahead at all times. And they're now moving into meth again. The fourth wave is upon us. But we also have at the table USDA to help rural America get the information, the resources they need. We have the Department of Interior there. We have the Department of Labor and HUD. Why? Because we want to treat the whole person. If you're fortunate enough to come out of a drug court program or a drug treatment program and you emerge on the other side, where's the housing? Where's the skills training? Where's the education? Where's the employment opportunities? So we're trying to connect all of that together. I'm very happy to leave you with very good news. My last comment is very good news. This battleship is turning slowly but in the right direction. It was just announced by the CDC and HHS that for the first time since 1990, so first time in 30 years, we've had a precipitous decline in overdose deaths due to drugs in this country. It's down 5.1% across the board, and in some of the hardest hit states like Ohio, it's down 22%. So thank you very much for your interest in the topic, and yes, and thank you for any partnership you might be willing to give.
I think everyone has a pretty good idea why President Trump has put Counselor Conway in charge of the task force on this, and the kind of focus and energy it brings to the process of working on really a crisis that our country is facing. So we have less time than we originally had, so I want to make sure that we get to talking to Angela Heisey, who's from Lados, and a company that's really showing leadership in a couple ways. I think on the technology side when it comes to the question of detection of fentanyl, but also leadership on the human side and the question of how you work on these issues. I'm wondering if you could just talk to us about what your company is doing to work on this issue and what's the motivation behind it, where it came from.
Perfect, thank you. I think it's really important to understand the last 2 years and the passion that our company has behind this. So 2 years ago, one of our employees sent an email to our CEO, and the subject was a father's request. And unfortunately, John Heineman had just lost his son because of opioid addiction. And he was making a plea to our CEO to take action and to get our corporation involved and to get other employees aware of the issues around the opioid crisis. My boss, our CEO, replied, "We're all in." And that launched our campaign. And it started with our employees, and we did it from an awareness perspective to create a safe space, like Kellyanne talked about, making sure that stigma is no longer there, and that we could provide the support and awareness that our employees needed. We also tackled the prescription issue. And what we found is that post-surgery, 80% of our employees were overprescribed drugs. And instead of getting 30 days of drugs, we changed our plan so they could only get 10 days. They have the option to renew. They would just have to go ask the doctor. And what we found is less than 20% of our employees ever asked to go renew. Then we decided to take it to the communities, the places where we live and we work. And we were able to partner with incredible organizations like the Chris Atwood organization, who really promotes Narcan, which is a nasally administered overdose reversal drug, which, if you think about it, on average today, there's 7 Americans that die because of house fires. No one thinks twice about having a fire extinguisher in their house. 130 Americans die every day. And this simple drug could save lives. And so educating first responders and communities on this possibility, we think is incredibly important. Then the third area that we really focused on is really partnerships with our government counterparts as well as industry. Our CEO called to Fortune 500 companies to say that we need a call for action. We need a pledge to say that all private industry can help with this. It's one of the reasons why we're very excited to be able to sign the industry pledge that the White House has launched. We also challenged our engineers to see what we could do from a technology perspective and what future technology could do to help decrease the supply that comes into the United States. And what we found is today, my team has reveal machines that scan many of your baggage when you go through the airports. And by some creative innovation, we could change the algorithms and detect fentanyl in very small quantities as it's coming in through the mail system or express couriers. And our team, I was very proud, they won an Igniting Innovation Award earlier this year for it, and we're starting to work with US Customs to be able to deploy. What we found is that this technology allows for 7 times more detection than what we have today to be able to catch the supply as it comes in. We're very committed and passionate about our campaign and absolutely looking to work with other private industries as well as our government partners to ensure that we do everything that we can to end this crisis.
So So one thing I wanted to highlight is Angela mentioned a pledge. So her company has been working to gather private industry to work together on this issue. And last year, President Trump came to the UN General Assembly and gathered 130 countries behind a pledge for governments to work together to counter the global drug threat. And this year, part of the reason we are privileged to have Kellyanne with us and to have Udom Dillon with us is that we wanted to have a conversation with industry about an industry pledge and an effort to get companies on board in a project, in a task force, in a dialogue about how we work together to confront this issue. And Leidos is taking a big leadership role in that, and we appreciate it, and we look for great things to come from that. So thank you very much. Udom. You have one of the toughest jobs, I think, in government, to be honest with you. Being the administrator of DEA means that you are confronting a very agile and very capable, highly resourced opponent. And I know that you throw everything you can at that from a law enforcement perspective. And I've spent a lot of time with your agents because we work very closely with you. And they're extraordinary and they're dedicated. So for you, you have this sort of law enforcement piece, but what's our opportunity to work with industry? What kinds of things are you doing with private companies, and how does that amplify the work that you and your dedicated team are doing?
Well, I think there are actually a lot of opportunities to work with industry. People may not think about public-private partnerships with DEA, but those opportunities really do exist. We partnered with Google. Google works with us on our National Drug Prescription Take-Back Day, which is this October 26th from 10 to 2. It's a Saturday. If you go to Google on that day, they will take you right to a collection site near you. Facebook does advertising for us. We work with Discovery Education to develop education modules for students and for teachers. And we're actually working on one now for the workforce community so that people in their offices can actually look at these modules and learn about how to deal with addiction issues and the opioid crisis. Red Ribbon Week is a really big thing that we've been doing at DEA for decades now. In the 1980s, Special Agent Enrique Kiki Camarena was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by Mexican drug trafficking organizations. After that occurred, people got together in communities all around the country and wore red ribbons as a way to honor him and also as a way to pledge against drug trafficking and drug abuse. So every year during the last week of October, we celebrate Red Ribbon Week. We actually invite everybody in the business community to celebrate with us. You could go to DEA.gov, and there's a toolkit there that you can learn how to participate and how to get the message out for Red Ribbon, which is a message of don't use drugs, basically. And we ask our youth to take a pledge not to use drugs. So that's another way that we think we can partner with the private sector. And of course, our National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day that we've been doing twice a year since 2010. This is an opportunity to take drugs from, people can clean out their medicine cabinets of unused, unwanted, and expired prescription medications and bring those in. Those have been hugely successful. That's taken a lot of medications out of circulation that people can become addicted to. But DEA also has a regulatory function, and that regulatory function allows us to set quotas for the amount of opioids, addictive opioids, that are prescribed every year. And since 2016, we've actually reduced the amount of opioids that manufacturers can manufacture by about 47%, and our newest regulation will get us down to a 53% reduction over the last 4 years. When you put all of this together, we've taken many of the drugs, the opioids, the prescription opioids that people have become addicted to, we've made them unavailable, and supply matters. So we hope that by doing that, we'll be seeing reductions in overdose deaths this year. The preliminary data does show reductions of a fairly significant number when it comes to prescription drug overdoses. So those are the various ways that we would ask you to consider partnering with us. It's actually pretty easy, and we think assisting us getting the prevention message out would be hugely beneficial.
And I think this comes on top of the sort of technological innovations, and like we talked about artificial intelligence in our roundtable and a few other things. So I also think there's opportunities on that side that could really give a leg up to law enforcement as they take this on. So we are very short on time, Kellyanne. I will give the floor to you for any closing comments.
Well, I want to shout out to the canines, because in Washington they have a little saying, if you want to get a friend, if you want to find a friend, get a dog. But if you want to help, get a dog. As you know, the canines are incredibly helpful, as well as the technology. But there are probably examples in private industry where your supply chain has been corrupted or intercepted that had very little to do with fentanyl or any type of drug. And those best practices, what was done, what could be done, is incredibly valuable and helpful to us. Also, I mean, I would say that the old saying, see something, say something, that applied to packages after 9/11, that certainly applies to domestic terrorism, international terrorism now. It also just applies on the softer side to people in your own circle of life. When you talk to addiction specialists, when you talk to health professionals, when you talk to law enforcement, the statistics of people who overdose at home or overdose in front of or take these drugs with somebody they know, somebody who's familiar to them, or took the prescription right out of the gym bag or off or grandmom's medicine cabinet or off the kitchen counter at home, quite, and not furtively, quite just take it like you're taking something else off the counter, thinking, you know, this makes so-and-so feel better when they take it, their pain seems to be gone, it can't possibly hurt me. And nobody should be using somebody else's prescription, the health professionals say, for that reason. The other thing that's going on that we didn't have time to talk about here is that so much of the money and so much of the information is going right to the local communities. So last year, our ONDCP, Director Jim Carroll, who's not here, he made two big announcements with the president and others. One was the largest number of recipients ever and the largest amount of grant money ever given through the Drug-Free Communities program that has been around for a long time. But when you hear about programs, you wonder, whatever happened to that? Is that still around? It's actually flourishing and thriving and growing. Same thing with the drug court programs. Many people resist going into them, and then many are very happy once they emerge from them. But I think that basic education information is incredibly important. And we have any number of ways that the private sector can get involved. Last October 26th, the end of October, we had about 28 private and public partners committing something, and it's been tremendous. The ideas they came up with are just so incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Just please join me in a round of applause for these dedicated, wonderful people. Thank you.